I'm going to take you around a tenor saxophone that goes quite under that radar of saxophones that you should check out. Now the tenor that I'm talking about, as written in the title, is this Buffet S2. Now when it comes to the saxophone landscape of trying horns out, most people think let's try out a Selmer, Yanagisawa, Kyleworth, Yamaha, a Taiwanese horn even, and they're pretty good options to try out. But how many times have you heard anybody say, let's try a Buffet S2? Now I'm trying to think, how many times have I heard that? None. Zero. Most people, of course, go for the more popular names, which is common sense. Now, when it comes to this brand in particular, Buffet, they have the S1, which I've already featured on my channel. I think it's a very, very nice, well-built horn. Very big, but darker sound. And it's a very good option to check out. Now the Buffets in general tend to be overlooked a bit, unless you're a classical player, and then the S3 seems to spring to mind. So imagine what this little S2 must feel like when it's not even thought of in the equation of let's try that saxophone. So let's discuss this little fella here. Now it has a lot of similarities to the S1. Think of it this way, Yamaha 62 and Yamaha 32. Quite similar horns, except one has less engraving, not as fancy, but it's still basically the same horn. Well, that's how I look at the S2 and the S1. The brass feels a little bit thinner and lighter. That's not a bad thing, by the way. I'm going to get to that in a minute. The keywork is pretty similar. The layout, yes, very nice. Offset tone holes, so it feels a bit more modern. That means the tone holes are pulled to this side and to this side, so when your hands are on, it feels a bit more comfortable rather than having the tone holes in line, which is a little bit more old-fashioned and not as comfortable as these offset tone holes. And it has a lot of the similar features as the S1. So let me show you around this tenor saxophone, and then I'll discuss a little bit more in detail what I meant about the thickness of the brass. So first off, the S1 has the S1 logo on the front of the bell, as this has the S2 on the front of the bell also. Except the S1 has some nice fancy engraving all around there. Zero fancy engraving, just plain, it says what it is, and that looks actually okay to me. Now the key guards are also the same, look at that. They've got this funny fancy design there. There you go, check that out. Isn't that nice and fancy and frilly? It just guards the keys, that's what it's meant to do. Now the body to bell brace is slightly different to say your normal Yamahas and all the other horns that you get nowadays. This has an arched body to bell brace, like a little bridge for some insects that can crawl up and down from there to there. Although if you had insects all over your instrument, it's probably about time that you cleaned it. And I have no idea why I thought of an insect bridge. It's just a bit strange, but I guess that's just my stupid head. So let's check out the left and right hand keys. There they are, look at that. Isn't that looking fancy and nice? So the left and right keys feel, yeah, very nice there. Let's do my favourite sound. That's a nice sound, isn't it? Check it out again. Nice. Lovely. Has the plastic thumb rest, and it does have the high F sharp right in there. Wait a minute, it's wiggling around. Is it trying to copy my little friend there? We'll get to that in a minute. These left hand keys on the palm are quite substantial. Check out the size of them. They are right here under my paws wiggling around. And if you've got little hands, that's a lot easier to get a hold of than some tenors which are a little bit smaller. They're definitely not small. They're quite oversized, but they're very comfy as well. Now this pinky cluster has some strange little thing going on. It has this alternative rocking mechanism between the B flat and the C sharp there. Wait a minute, I'll just press the B flat. There it is, and you can slide across to that part, which does your C sharp as well. Now the amount of times I go from low B flat to C sharp is not that many, but I guess it's nice and easy on that one, and it looks pretty cool as well. Now introducing a very special friend of mine, the octave key, there. Now this is a fancy French horn, so it has some fancy French octave key wiggling, of course. I like to wiggle in my own fancy way. It's my wiggliness of French saxophone-ness. Now what else? There's something missing. Oh yes, I overhauled it. It was dirty and horrible. You can see what it looks like there. Look at that. Dirtiness. Dirty saxophone. So I decided, strip it down, get all these horrible, ugly pads out. Look at them. Look at these horribleness of pads. Horrible, dirty, old pads. Bye-bye. You gotta go. Sort out all the mechanic on it. In other words, tighten up all the sloppiness that was around it. Then I took this fella, when it was stripped down to a tube like that, I gave it my special saxophone spa. In other words, I put it in the sink, soap and water, and give it a good scrub. Like this. And you can see there, it needed it because it was pretty dirty and pretty rough. This was a scruffy little fella that needed a good clean up. So then I did the same to the key work. So I went round the whole saxophone, straightened, leveled out all the key cups, tightened up all the sloppiness in the mechanic. So now it's what you call tight and right. Now let's talk about the brass thickness that I mentioned earlier. Now the S1 feels a little bit thicker and a bit more dense in the thickness of the brass, where this is a little thinner, but not in a bad way, a little bit more light, and it feels a little bit more alive under the fingers. I know that sounds a bit strange, but if you're a player, you understand what I mean. It just feels like it's got a bit more character. Now, does that reflect in the sound? Well, let's find out. So I'm going to give this a hoot, and then I'll speak to you lot after I've made a noise. Final thoughts on this S2. First of all, I want to hear your thoughts. Write your comments in that section below and let's have a little bit of an interaction on it. I want to know your thoughts. What did it sound like to you? What did it look like to you? Now, back to my thoughts. Here we go. The S2 is my favourite out of the S1, the S2 and the S3. Now I can feel the similarities between this and the S1 and other buffet models, but there's something slightly different about this, and I think it's down to that brass element, with this being slightly lighter, maybe a little bit thinner, maybe not as dense, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, that's a great thing. I'm loving it, because this fella just feels a little bit more alive. I can feel the vibration in the saxophone. It just feels that I can get my sound in this instrument, where with the S1 I was kind of struggling a bit because it was a little bit darker and dampening my sound. Now don't get me started on the S3, because that is definitely not for me, not my thing. But anyway, let's go back to something more positive. This fella, this is an absolute winner. I like this tenor saxophone. It feels so nice. The tuning on this is wonderful. The intonation, everything is nicely locked in. I could get the cleanliness in the tone, the brightness, the edge, the fullness. It was all there. The sound I'm hearing in my thick skull was coming out of this lovely, not so thick brass. And that's a good thing. If you can play a horn and you're not thinking about, can I get my sound or not, and it just delivers, well, that's a win. Now, these have been marketed years back as intermediate, maybe introductory into the professional level horns, but I don't see it like that. Because if a horn gives you the sound that you want and you're not even thinking about how's the key work, how's the tuning, and how is the overall playability, well, that to me is a professional level horn, because it's taking all them little worries away and you're just left to play and enjoy. And that's exactly what you want to do on saxophone. Play, enjoy, make some noise from our bendy pieces of lovely metal. Now I'm going to throw this out there. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Doesn't matter, it's just speculation. Now remember when the Selmer Mark 7 was out? Nobody was really that much of a fan of them until fast forward many years later. The prices are going right up and everybody realizes how good the Mark 7 is. I've got a sneaking suspicion that the S2 might end up falling into that category, what you call a very underrated tenor saxophone, which should be definitely tried out. So that means this is now officially my new favourite in the buffet range, S2. And this one's all mine. So keep your paws away from my S2, get your own. But anyway, thank you very much for coming this far. If you're new to my channel, do me a huge favour, get your finger, click on that like button. And if you want to subscribe, that doesn't cost a thing. It makes my stupid head smile. And now it's time for me to go and grab something else which I really like, and that's my tea. It's officially tea o'clock. Speak to you all soon. Have a great day. Dun 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 dun.